and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun Cho. The United States said there's evidence of thousands of North Korean soldiers in Russia. South Korea has warned it may consider supplying lethal weapons directly to Ukraine to counter military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Today, we discuss the implications of North Korea's joining Russia's war in Ukraine.
There is evidence that there are DPRK troops in Russia.
Multiple Russian military training sites in eastern Russia, where they are currently undergoing training.
살상무기를 직접 공급하지 않는다는 원칙을 가지고 있었는데 그러한 부분에서도 더 유연하게 북한군의 활동 여하에 따라
김정은이가 자기 인민군을 불법 침략 전쟁의 총알바지로 팔아넘긴 것이다.
In the studio with me, Mr. Seiler, Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Seiler was former National Intelligence Officer for North Korea on the National Intelligence Council from 2020 to 2023. Mr. Seiler was the Special Envoy for Six-Party Talks and National Security Council Korea Director during the Obama administration. Mr. Seiler also served as Senior Analyst for U.S. Forces Korea. Mr. Seiler has worked on North Korea issues for over 40 years. Also joining us, Colonel David Maxwell, the Vice President of the Center for Asia-Pacific Security. Colonel Maxwell was a former military planner for the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Seiler, the White House said 3,000 North Korean troops are being trained in eastern Russia, and Vladimir Putin did not deny North Korean troops were there. And he said it is Moscow's business how to implement a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with North Korea. Is this a critical development that will change the direction of the Ukraine war?
Well, you know, there's a lot of difficulties and challenges that Russian forces face, and the international community's support of Ukraine's efforts to try to push back Russia will remain unchanged. I think it's a very troubling development for many reasons I think we'll talk about today. But I don't know overall that these forces and the numbers that they're talking about are going to make a game-changing difference on the battlefield.
So that number is 10,000 by December, according to NIS. Mr. Seiler, you were the National Intelligence Officer for North Korea. Why did it take longer for the United States to confirm that there are North Koreans in Russia compared to South Korea and Ukraine?
Well, you know, I'm certain that the team was looking at the available intelligence, making sure that all possible explanations were run to ground, and that we had sufficient confidence in our assessment of the number of troops and how we would put some type of policy context around it as it was announced. So I don't think there was any way in which, you know, I've seen speculation that the United States didn't trust the Republic of Korea numbers, or that National Intelligence Service may have gotten all or part of the story wrong. There was nothing like that involved in the time difference between the publication of the numbers.
And Colonel Maxwell, some 10,000 North Koreans will be there in Russia by December. Will they be a force multiplier? Will they be game changer? This is the first time that North Koreans are sending large ground troops overseas. How would the North Korean troops be integrated into Russia's command and control system?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the first issue is one of control and command. We call it command and control, but the North Koreans, it's control and command. They're going to face difficulties with language issues, Russian and North Korean. We've seen reports that the Russians have been trying to recruit Korean speakers. But there's really three ways that they will be employed. Number one, if they are special operations forces, they could be employed as their doctrine and missions dictate, operating behind the lines in those types of operations. Number two, they could be employed as conventional troops. And Kim Jong-un is probably sending his best trained troops, typically SOF are the best trained troops, but as conventional forces in the front lines where they would have to conduct traditional combined arms maneuver. And the question is, are they trained to do that? And will they be able to integrate fires from Russia, air power, things like that? And will this training in Eastern Russia be sufficient to give them those capabilities? The third way, of course, is simply integrating them as replacements into Russian forces. And then that simply confirms what many of the leaders have been saying, that North Korean forces will be cannon fodder. They certainly would be as individual replacements. The question is, in any of the first two scenarios, will they be able to achieve strategic effects that would be the game changer? And that's also really a function of, can Russia exploit the North Korean forces in such a way that they would achieve strategic objectives and effects, thus changing the outcome of the war. Lastly, I'll say this, is that I don't think that North Korean SOF, what they call SOF, which are not equivalent to Western or other special operations forces, but are they better trained than the Spetsnaz, than the GRU units, than the Wagner PMC group? Because none of the Russian SOF have fared very well in the meat grinder of Ukraine. And so whether North Korea can make a difference, the jury is still out, and we have to see how they're employed. But I am not confident that they are going to be able to bring anything significant to the battlefield that the Russians can exploit that would be a game changer.
And Colonel Maxwell, you were a Green Beret in the U.S. Army, right?
Yes.
And you're the person who would know very well about the special forces. And Colonel Maxwell, Russia's State Duma ratified the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement with North Korea. And with North Koreans now they're deployed in Russia, are North Korea and Russia now moving from partnership to blood alliance? Do you envision them doing military trainings together and increase their interoperability from here on?
That's a great question. And I think that certainly it appears that they're going to try to increase their interoperability for Putin's war in Ukraine. It seems like they've established the flow of training from the East and then the integration in Ukraine. But will that translate to a larger training regimen between Russia and North Korea? I'm not sure if that is. That remains to be seen. But the real essence of your question, I think, is, will they really have a mutual defense treaty that's based on shared values and trust, and will they come to the aid of each other? I frankly don't think so. I think they will remain transactional. I don't think that there would be an automatic commitment of Russia to support Kim Jong-un if he miscalculates and attacks the South. At the time, I'm sure Russia will make a decision based on its political calculus, the geostrategic calculus, and the conditions that exist at the time. I just don't foresee an automatic mutual defense action by Russia or North Korea.
Colonel Maxwell, these 10,000 North Koreans will have first-hand experience in the battlefield, and there are concerns that that kind of experience, coupled with Russia's transfer of high technology, military technology, could change the military balance on the Korean Peninsula.
Certainly, the high-tech transfer of military capabilities is a real threat and a real problem. Improving their ICBM nuclear capabilities, that's a problem. These soldiers who may gain combat experience, while everyone touts how important combat experience is, and it is, but I would argue that it is training that's more important. And will these soldiers come back, if they survive, with sufficient lessons learned that can be translated to a training regimen in North Korea that will be able to transfer those lessons to large numbers of North Korean People's Army forces? And then, even if they can transfer those lessons, will they conduct sustained training year-round? Because training is very, very perishable. And so if they don't have the resources, the money, the fuel, and the time, and time being they have to divert away from other projects, economic projects, construction projects that they work on, if they don't have that, they're not going to significantly improve the readiness of the North Korean People's Army, and thus are not going to be a significant improvement in their capability to attack the South.
Mr. Seiler, Russia's foreign ministry warned that it will respond harshly to any attempt to threaten Russia's security. This comes after South Korea's presidential office said that it could consider sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. Now, is South Korea-Russia relations going beyond repair at this point? Do you think South Korea should deal with Russia from the position of strength or try to manage this relationship?
Yeah, I do believe South Korea has been and will continue to benefit from approaching this with a position of confidence, not so much strength, but confidence. And that is, you know, first of all, when you get talking points like this from Russia, you know they're designed to have some type of deterrent effect. There's going to be some flourish to them. They're designed to make you double guess yourself or refrain from taking the legitimate actions you otherwise should be taking. So you have to be willing to kind of make a calculation in the long run. What is the harm to Russia-ROK relations beyond that which already has been inflicted by Russia's actions? We got to remember, Russia is the one who invaded Ukraine. Russia is the one that's invited North Korean soldiers. Russia is the one that's been using North Korean munitions and missiles in a way that's reinvigorating North Korea's munitions industry. So if I found myself in the position of senior ROK policymaker, I would look solely at how you could establish credibility of the warnings you've made about if this is true, then we must do something. Areas where contributions by the ROK to the war could build trust and confidence within European allies who have been looking for the ROK to do a little bit more. So I think this provides an excellent opportunity to take some actions that have been under consideration for some time with, yes, some near-term risk. There'll be a straining of the relationship, but I would say, so what? In the longer run, you will gain Russia's respect for having acted in a way that is clearly in your national interest.
Mm-hmm. Colonel Maxwell, do you think this is the right time or even past time for South Korea to provide lethal weapons like artillery shells, K9 howitzers, K2 tanks, and the Chunmo multiple rocket launchers? Would they be any help to Ukraine to change the dynamics on the war?
Well, my perspective from understanding Ukraine's defense of its country against Putin is that, yes, it's time for South Korea to step up as a member of the arsenal of democracy. It's a global pivotal state that supports the rules-based international order. South Korea is the 6th largest producer of defense articles in the world, and its equipment is world-class, far superior to anything North Korea produces. And because of the Iraq-U.S. alliance, the majority of its equipment is interoperable with NATO equipment, which is the majority of equipment that is now being fielded to Ukraine. So tanks, howitzers, long-range, multiple rocket launch systems, all of these are critical elements of military capabilities that the Ukrainians will benefit from. And stepping back, if we want Ukraine to be successful and to successfully defend itself, we're to create the conditions for a negotiated settlement that returns Ukrainian territory to Ukraine. These military weapon systems can be a game changer. They will be more of a game changer for Ukraine than, as Sid said, the North Korean forces being provided to the Russians.
And Mr. Seiler, South Korea is considering sending intelligence units to the Ukraine war to interrogate the North Korean captives and to learn about North Korean tactics and strategies in the battlefield. How valuable is this information? And wouldn't sending a team there, North Koreans are already there, sending South Korean team there, wouldn't that become a proxy war of South and North Korea in Ukraine?
You'd have to really redefine the term proxy war to consider that a number of intelligence officers, maybe you don't send uniform, maybe you send civilians to avoid the force-on-force appearance. But I think it's a very prudent step. At the very least, I can't imagine the Ukrainians have the Korean language skills in their workforce necessary to handle the North Korean defectors, other North Koreans that would be captured. And that, the question about would you be doing battlefield interrogations on, war strategy? Probably not. There's no immediate value in, if you want to gain let's say your goal is to gain understanding of Korean People's Army's readiness, et cetera. All those types of questions have no no real urgency that you need to kind of have interrogations on the ground real time. But the humanitarian aspects of being able to help the Ukrainians take in North Korean defectors and other EPWs, that would be the value of sending some type of assistance.
And don't miss the word that said is used twice now, defectors. This is something that no one is really talking about. We saw a report that there were some 18 North Korean soldiers who supposedly defected. They're back under Russian control, from what I understand, based on the reports. But this is something that we really have to look at. What will be the coherency of these military units, and will they defect at the first chance they get? We have seen reports now that Ukraine is already conducting psychological operations, broadcasting in Korean language, food, welfare, to surrender. And so I think that this is very important. And then when that happens, we have to be very concerned with the breakdown of the North Korean People's Army, the loss of coherency on a larger scale. And then, of course, what do we do with those, what does Ukraine do? And what does South Korea do with those soldiers who defect? And where will they seek asylum?
Mr. Seiler, an important element here is how China sees all this. Recent book, War, writes about CIA Director Bill Burns reporting to the president that China is unsettled to some extent because it has emboldened Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un could go reckless. How do you see China viewing all this? And wouldn't China take some kind of action to regain more influence over North Korea?
I think that's a lot of what many of us have been saying about how China views this growing relationship, even before the commitment of troops. China is nervous when developments take place in its region with strategic significance that they otherwise don't have control of, where they feel they've lost leverage, they've lost insight, and potentially run the risk of the strategic situation on the ground evolving to a point where it runs counter to China's interest. And we've stated over and over again this idea of an emboldened and enabled North Korea, that not only enabled in terms of the technologies and assistance North Korea has provided to North Korea's WMD missile and probably even conventional program, the possibility that the Russians could be assisting in a wide range of technologies such as nuclear-powered submarines, advanced air defense, ISR, UAVs. All this leads to an enabled North Korea that potentially could be emboldened. And, particularly if Kim Jong-un feels, again, that he's got some objectives vis-a-vis South Korea that can be achieved through the use of force. And now, Russia has his back, both diplomatically in terms of supporting the action and in terms of the capabilities necessary to execute that action. China needs to be concerned about all this because instability will be coming to the region in a way that China has minimum opportunity to block. And this is a challenge right now where, yes, the Chinese lack the leverage that they're otherwise willing to exert on North Korea. And so right now they're in a wait and see. They're likely not inclined to try to intervene in a way particularly where they don't think they'll succeed. So there's a value here. There may be an opportunity here for the United States to work with China, to seek to get China to apply more pressure on Moscow and Pyongyang, to have China see these developments as running contrary to both of our interests and exploring ways to work together.
And I fully agree with all of that. And, there are some historical parallels here. China and Russia getting played by North Korea. 1950 all over again. Kim Il-sung played Mao and Stalin at that time. And so I think China's right to be concerned, but we all need to be concerned. And I think
who gave the green light then? Stalin.
Stalin.
And who paid the price? Mao.
China. Mao.
Yeah.
So they have every right to be concerned. Mm-hmm. There is one counter, though, in the fact that in the bigger picture, I think that Xi Jinping wants Putin to be successful and not fail in Ukraine because of the fallout from that.
Mr. Seiler, Kim Jong-un visited missile bases to examine readiness. North Korea's recent string of actions include codifying South Korea as ultimate enemy state and blowing up parts of roads and railways connecting to South Korea. You write in your recent commentary that what could be ultimately contained now could evolve into something more threatening. Do you think North Korea's provocations on the peninsula is somehow connected to its actions in Ukraine and Russia, or is it two separate issues?
They seem to be two separate issues for now, but they reflect a kind of similar origins in terms of North Korea's willingness to, one, openly threaten South Korea and warn of some type of military actions should this enemy state touch a single blade of our grass, and emboldened enough to send troops to Russia. So at a certain level, the causality is somewhat similar. This emboldened state. I don't think, sending troops was part of an elaborate plan to set up the next lethal or kinetic provocation on the peninsula. So that still remains uncertain. I think, we've been talking about this for all of 2024, right? The October surprise, and here we are with about 4 days left. And again, the surprise is that they haven't surprised us as much as we thought they would. But also the logic that North Korea has been laying the groundwork through the constitutional revision, which also means not revealing how that constitution was precisely revised in the recent readout of the Supreme People's Assembly, means the time's not right. But, if you look at past behavior, rather than, kicking the outgoing U.S. president in the rear as he walks out the door, they save their provocation for the incoming leadership. Kim may believe that he will have Russians backing in whatever actions he has envisioned for 2025.
Colonel Maxwell, North Korea unveiled photos of what it says is South Korean drones that flew over Pyongyang. South Korea does not confirm nor deny whether it has sent drones into Pyongyang. Experts in South Korea, however, say that these drones look similar to those used by South Korean military. And given that the drone supposedly, according to the North Koreans, flew near the Sanamdong Missile Research Center, is it possible that South Korea was doing reconnaissance activities there? And do you think it's useful for South Korea to show some kind of actions like this rather than just doing rhetorics on North Korea?
Well, first, I think obviously it's possible. South Korea has the capability now to deploy myriad assets into North Korea to conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, as well as targeting. South Korea and the alliance can penetrate North Korean airspace if they choose to do so. And so it's possible. That said, I think from a practical point of view, I think that our space-based intelligence capabilities probably provide sufficient ISR so that they don't have to send drones to do that. And so I really challenge the veracity of North Korean reporting. It would not be hard for North Korea to acquire a South Korean drone or even just create deep fake photographs to be able to do this. And so I think we have to look at why is North Korea making these allegations now? I think it's part of its internal problems. Kim Jong-un is under tremendous internal stress, and we see the pattern of 2024 where he has got to generate the external threat. And he does that when he faces internal threats. He has prioritized nuclear weapons, missile development, advanced military capabilities over the welfare of the people. And so he's got to show that there is a threat from the South, from the U.S., in order to justify the suffering and sacrifice of the Korean people in the North.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Mr. Seiler, Colonel Maxwell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back here next week with U.S. experts to discuss the two Koreas and the region right here from Washington.